Mr. Chairman, we had an opportunity to speak briefly before your testimony, and I was sharing with you that when I talk to people about this bill and inform them that the Securities and Exchange Commission has been at the forefront of plain language advocacy, many people are shocked by that. Because I think when most people think of the work that the Commission does and the nature of its complex financial circumstances, they would probably not assume that an agency like yours would be leading the charge. So I was hoping maybe you could share with us a little bit about the institutional obstacles you have encountered and that you still encounter in trying to make this something that the entire agency embraces as something that's good for investors, it's good for the companies that you're regulating, and it's good for the consumers.
Well, I suppose that one reason that people react as you suggest they do when you mention that the SEC is leading the effort for language is that these days when they think of the SEC, they may think first of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Of course, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was our handiwork here in the Congress, something that the SEC administers, but surely whatever one thinks of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, no one would contend it's Hemingway. Translating legislative language into plain English is something that either the government can help with or not, but it has to be done. People who are trying to understand what they're supposed to do have to go through that exercise of taking the convoluted legalese and turning it into something actionable. They have to be able to tell their employees what to do. The customers, if it involves a contract or some disclosure that goes to them, likewise have to translate it into something that relevance or meaning to them. We live in a nation of over 300 million people. For many of them, English is not even their first language. But for all of them, except the small percentage, lawyers among them, legalese is their second language or further down the list. So I think it's just absolutely vitally important for an agency such as the SEC, which is focused on being the investor's advocate, to take that burden up ourselves, and that's why we were doing this. We are a lawyer-centric agency, however, and asked about what are the institutional obstacles, that's the biggest one. There is a lot of lawyers writing for lawyers that goes on. Since the lawyers can all understand it much more easily, it ultimately becomes a shorthand for them. They don't always see the need, and so it requires a constant refocusing on who the customer is and what is the point of all of this disclosure regime.
Well, after being here for just 1 year, it became apparent to me that this is a city that is run by people under the age of 30, many of whom have excellent educations. A number of them have legal educations, and I think one of the obstacles is trying to convince them that that education will not be put to waste if they focus on plain language drafting. One of the things that is mentioned in your excellent SEC Plain Language Handbook is this quote: "Lawyerisms are words like aforementioned, whereas, re geste, and hereinafter. They give writing a legal smell, but they carry little or no legal substance." And the problem is that these words clog up many of the publications that agencies send out for people to use around this country in a variety of settings, and they become real barriers to effective understanding of what the intent of those communications are. So what type of advice do you have for other agencies in terms of trying to implement plain language techniques and how they communicate? And I would also like to point out that there's nothing that bars a federal agency from voluntarily implementing plain language as part of its communications philosophy.
I think that's the important point. We need legislation here to bring the people along that are unwilling to come. But we don't need legislation to get anyone who wants to be part of this movement. In the government, there are a lot of public-spirited people who understand that we are here to serve, who would like to get moving with this right away. Any federal worker that has on his or her desk Microsoft Word already has a tool that they can run what they're writing through to determine the level of readability. Flesch reading ease score, referring to an algorithm developed by a guy named Flesch, who, believe it or not, was a lawyer at the University of Pennsylvania. Also a professional writer by training, and he got his PhD for developing this test. It is one of these mechanical tests, so it gets some people's back up to have to expose their writing to it. But I ran my testimony today through the test and found that it would comply with the state laws governing insurance contracts that are measured by the Flesch Reading Ease score, because typically they require a minimum score of 40 to 50 on the 100-point scale. I came in at just under 49 today.